Thanks for being there. Hi. I'm Eric Nunes, and I work at the Heritage Library at Atelier du Livre d'Art at Imprimerie Nationale. For the past 10 years, I've been conducting a personal research on wood type in France. At the beginning of my research, I was confronted with a lack of sources. Apart from Kelly's work, American wood type, there were few studies on the subject, almost nothing for Europe, and even less for France. The sources are rare too. Like Kelly says, it is unfortunate that more information is not available about wood type industry, but the business was a minor one, the main obscure, and the records incomplete. But the first thing I learned observing wood type I began to collect is that French makers, if they use stamps, imprint all the letter in a font. Not just the letter A, as was common in England or the USA, which is a big help for the researcher. To conduct my research, I observed many letters as possible and searched through libraries to find specimens, advertising, or articles in print-related journals. Then I compiled all this stuff in a personal digital library. Now let's begin with an overview of the manufacturers active in the 19th century. Here is a chronological overview of the main actors in the wood type industry in France and the French-speaking region of Switzerland. These manufacturers are certified by a specimen, an article in a printing-related journal, or by types bearing their stamp. There are approximately 10 other factories whose names can be found in directories, but without material evidence, it is difficult to determine whether they were specialized factories or simple distributors. One of the first to manufacture wood type was Adrien Paulet, a printer from Nancy. This is attested by Alcan in his journal Typology Tucker in 1839. Alcan stated that Paulet had been making display wood types since 1837. This is the only known testimony about Paulet's involvement in this particular activity. The wood type produced by Paulet were used on posters that he printed for the city. To support Alcan's statement, I was fortunate enough to find 3 fonts with Paulet's stamp: a slab antique, a Grecian, and some antique condensed letters. These pieces are probably the oldest stamped wood type in France. The presence of this stamp on all the blocks indicates that these letters were intended for sale and not solely for the printer's personal use, as was the case with many other printers. Paulet's activity marked the transition from a wood lettering practice to a wood type industry. While it did not use mechanical means to cut the type, it was creating font rather than just individual letters or words as blocks, which had been the norm previously. According to Alcan's article, Paulet was also involved in developing a mysterious process for creating typefaces mechanically to replace wood type and polytyped letters. However, like many other inventions of the 19th century, this process left no traces. The Paulet's example is significant that the market is about to switch from a state of demand to supply to a state of supply to demand. But Paulet was first and foremost a printer. The first exclusive manufacturer of wood type in France was Félix Delamare, who operated in Bressuire between 1841 or 1848 and 1852. Although he had no knowledge of typefaces or specimen to his name, we do know that he specialized in making wood type thanks to his rehabilitation request after his proscription. Delamare was an opponent of Louis-Napoléon Bonaparte's coup d'etat and was exiled in the United States in 1852. where he first settled in New York and then in Wisconsin. However, despite the archive mention it, there are no records of him continuing his wood type making activity in the US. I assume that he sold his factory to a former employee, but it is unclear who that might have been. Candidates include Louis Moreau, Armand Chaboty, or Léon Sainzon. Léon Sainzon, another opponent, was under house arrest in Argenton for his participation in the coup d'etat, ran his own factory in the city until 1879, and his typefaces were distributed in Paris by the foundry Renault Aeropsys and later by Peignot. Bressuire counts 8 other factories that competed or succeeded each other until 1917. Among them, Dunia will have a brief existence, but he produced an important specimen and distributed his production in Paris at the Boileau foundry. This specimen is kept in École Etienne library. It is known only by this copy. In Bressuire too, Henri Dureau took over the Chaboty and Ploquin factory and will be active with his family between 1893 and 1970. Still in the West, on the Atlantic coast, Morel produced wood type in La Roche-sur-Yon between 1861 and 1877, before being taken over by Nunes, who ceased his activity at the end of the century. In Paris, Gaston Dubosc started his factory around 1860 and published a specimen in 1865. The specimen is currently visible in the collection of the Forney Library, as well as in a dozen libraries in the United States. This specimen is historically significant as the first known wood-type specimen in France. In Switzerland, two French expatriates also founded 2 important factories. Charles Bonnet, a communard, fled Paris in 1870 and settled in Geneva, where he founded his factory in 1871. He had associates in Paris and founded a branch, the Usine Gutenberg. A specimen is kept at Forney Library and is available online. The other French manufacturer established in Switzerland was Auguste Martin, who we will talk about soon. The study of the manufacturing methods used in France shows us that they slightly differ from those in use in the USA. The mechanization will be later. In the United States, the invention of the lateral milling machine by Wells and its coupling to a pantograph by Leavenworth were the origin of the wood-type industry in the 1830s. In France, on the other hand, the work remained essentially manual for at least the first 24 years of wood-type production. While the use of the lateral router can be dated to the 1870s, the use of the pantograph is only documented at Bonnet's factory and also at Martin's factory in Switzerland in 1875. Primary sources are scarce for studying the method of making these wood types, but a few articles as well as observation of the letters give us enough clues to distinguish 3 manufacturing methods. In the first one, the face is entirely cut by hand after using a pattern to trace the outline of the letter on the block. This method is favored by Constant Audebout. The hand-cut face is easy to spot. You can see the knives and gouges traces around the shape and on the letter's shoulder, which is often bugging. In the second method, the letters are both manually and mechanically cut. First, the outline of the letter is traced onto the material using a pattern. Then a router is used to remove as much of non-printing area as possible. Finally, the outline of the letter is cut using a knife. Eugène Ploquin principally used this method, but did cut entirely by hand too. Both of these methods resulted in typefaces with slight differences in shape, depending on the skill level of the cutter. The latter are not perfect. On this image, the differences between the characters are highlighted by a red mask reproducing the outline of the first A. We can see the milling router traces too. In the third method, the letters are mainly cut with the machine pantograph tool with manual finishing. This is the method principally used in Switzerland by Bonnet and Martin, and this is the method used in the USA since 1830s. It ensures a better regularity in the shape of the letter. And this letter M, cut by Bonnet, one can distinguish two sides of milling cutters, the smaller one, which follows the matrix and clears the letter, and the larger one, which clears the remainder of the shoulder. Ploquin and Audebout are two manufacturers based in Bressuire. They were both active during the period between 1877 and 1890. Ploquin, who was Chabot's son-in-law, took over the factory in his own name around 1878. Similarly, Audebout took over the factory from his boss Louis Moreau, who was a former associate of Chabot. These two factories are the oldest and most significant in the city. They are in direct competition for both national and international markets. They have published catalogues of the productions, which are quite similar. Ploquin's catalog have been digitized by the Harvard Library, but sadly, not the Audebout, who is known by only two copies, one kept in the University Library of Amsterdam, the other at the University Library of Columbia. Despite being of equal importance and quality, these factories have adopted different manufacturing methods, which serve as the basis for their respective advertising approaches. Audebout works exclusively by hand. In this advertising, he attacks both the router pantographs method used by Bonnet on end grain and the supposed superiority of the mechanical process claimed by his direct competitor, Eugène Ploquin. Ploquin, who for his part claimed to do a perfect work that the hand cannot produce and that no machine has done so far. Audebout answers the same year by this warning: do not confuse the products of the Audebout company with those of the mechanical factories. But these advertising arguments are finally unfounded. Indeed, we have seen that both Ploquin and Audebout hand-carved the outline of the letter, resulting in good quality but still improvable prints. The impact of machines on letter quality is insignificant, with the difference being in productivity alone. After having managed a sawmill in Ardon in Switzerland, Auguste Martin, a Frenchman, established his wood-type factory in a very systematic manner. According to press announcements, he began searching for pear wood as early as 1873, indicating his desire to accumulate a stock of raw materials before launching his factory. Simultaneously, he worked on a pantograph for manufacturing wood type, which he patented in France in 1874. Although only the description and the drawing published with the patent are known, it is evident that this pantograph was a machine only capable of reproducing design on a 1:1 scale. That means it was still necessary to create a pattern for each body size and style. Nonetheless, it was a significant improvement, and it appeared to be one of the earliest pantographs in use in the French-speaking era. In the same time, only Charles Bonnet seemed having used one. After these preparations, Martin joined forces with the Parisian Coderet to open both his factory in Ardon and a branch in Paris in August 1875. its first advertising claimed as a particularity of his manufacture, a production by machinery with a patented pantograph. In the meantime, he published his third specimen, 157 pages. It offers a wide variety of characters, up to 50 Cicero in size. Martin worked on end grain, principally with the router pantograph method, but as evidenced by typefaces with a stamp, Martin was capable of producing both hand-cut and machine-made faces. He will produce many specimens, books, and posters. Towards the end of the 20s, Martin supplied directly as a subcontractor or supplier the Fonderie Typographique Française. The firm ceased definitively its activity during the Second War. In the 20th century, there were only 5 main manufacturers. Chauvin in Bressuire, who took over Audebout, the Dureau in Bressuire as well, who took over Ploquin, the De Berny and Peignot foundry, and finally Jacobi, active in Grenoble, took over by Morel in 1968. Morel was the last active manufacturer in France, ceasing the production of wood type in 1982 to focus on the manufacture of cutting forms. By the mid-20th century, manufacturing methods had completely changed. Industrial pantographs were now used to reproduce characters, rather than machines invented for this specific purpose. In 1975, Morel uses 5 machines operated by women. Like its predecessor, it tried to diversify its production by making wood supply for print shops. The few archives that have been gathered show that Morel paid royalties of 5% of sales for the use of characters designed by Peignot for the Robure, by Bauesche-Gießerei for the Caravelle, and 10% royalties for Olive's designs like the Banco, the Vendôme, the Compact. Here's the compact matrices. Morel also provided Sofady Showcard Company with its products. However, one of Sofady's last orders from Morel was never fulfilled. The order consisted of a series of numbers in 60-point Cicero that were made of beech plywood to reduce costs. In the document that I got from Morel, I bought a series of specimens used as models or inspiration by Jacobi and then Morel. These specimens are now digitized and available on archive.org. In 1982, the Fonderie Centrale, formerly Dutrex, purchased Morel's stock of equipment, pantograph, wood, and matrices. However, it appeared that the purchased equipment was never used, as the market for wood type had completely dried up that time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a few minutes just for questions, if there's a questions in the audience. No questions? No? Well, thank you so much.